Imagine this. You are Donald Trump. Right now, your name is known on every continent. It's written in capital letters, shouted at rallies, whispered in offices, and hated in newsrooms. Half the world is convinced you're a disaster. The other half believes you're the only one who says out loud what everyone else is afraid even to think. Imagine a life where every gesture is read as a signal, every word is broken down into quotes, and any silence is treated as a threat, where a tweet moves markets and a joke triggers an international scandal, where you are either worshipped or erased, no middle ground. Imagine walking into a room and feeling the atmosphere change. Someone smiles too broadly, someone looks at the floor, someone is already sharpening a knife. You're used to it. Conflict is your working environment. And now imagine, I'm gonna tell you what your life would look like if you were Donald Trump, where that confidence came from, why you speak the way you speak, and how a man with German roots became the loudest critic of migration in U.S. history. Let's go. I was born in 1946, New York City, Queens. Let me be clear right away. I was not poor, but no one ever let me relax. In our family, there was a simple rule. If you have everything, expectations are twice as harsh. No, you're great just for existing. Only show me what you're going to do with it. My father, Fred Trump, was a developer, a man who believed not in fate, but in calculation. He didn't say, "Son, I'm proud of you." He said, "Son, did you check the numbers?" In our family, that counted as care. Hugs were replaced by spreadsheets, warm words by interest rates. Love in our house was practical. You're given a chance, then they step aside, they watch. If you survive, great. If not, well, experience is useful too. I learned early on that emotions are nice, but you don't build a business on them. Control, on the other hand, that's different. At 5, I was sent to Q Forest School. That's where I met Peter Brandt, also the son of a wealthy father, also with an attitude. We got along well. Schoolwork interested us only marginally. Sports, though, that was another story. We played anything that ran, flew, or could be thrown, and we rooted for the Brooklyn Dodgers like proper New York boys. In the summers, the family went to Florida. We stayed at the Fontainebleau. From childhood, I got used to expensive hotels, vast lobbies, and people who spoke as if the entire world were their negotiation room. That does wonders for your perspective. At school, I was considered energetic, very energetic. I was often kept after class. My parents looked at it without emotion and decided the energy needed an outlet. That's how at 13, I ended up at the New York Military Academy. They quickly explained where you are, who you are, and why you get up before sunrise. Honestly, I liked it there. Uniforms, order, competition. Everything was clear. I played football, baseball, became team captain. I liked geometry. Everything either works or it doesn't. No philosophy. Girls paid attention too, which earned me a fast reputation as a ladies' man. At the same time, I had almost no close friends. The most reliable person in my life was my coach. He spoke briefly and to the point, an ideal communication format. During summers, I increasingly went to construction sites with my father. Dust, concrete, people nervously checking their watches. That's where I learned a simple truth. If you control the process, you control the result. If you don't, be ready to explain yourself. After the academy, I had one strange dream. Movies. Yes, really. Cameras, screens, big images. Then I sat down, ran the numbers, and realized movies are beautiful. Real estate is reliable. I enrolled at Fordham, studied for 2 years, realized it could be faster, transferred to Wharton, graduated, and went straight to work for my father. No pause to find myself. I'd already found myself. Thanks. From there, things escalated. The family's starting capital, about $413 million, made it possible to play a serious game, completely change my father's business model, and move into luxury real estate. And I made the decision to move into New York City. New York, late 70s. The city looks like it's already been buried, but no one bothered to tell the residents. Manhattan is gray, dirty, dangerous. Businesses are leaving. Money is leaving. Confidence leaves first. Everyone looks at downtown and says the same thing. It's over. I looked and said, great, that means it's cheap. Where others saw decline, I saw discount. While everyone was running from Manhattan, I was walking in, slowly, confidently, with a calculator. I've always liked places people turn away from. Fewer competitors. More opportunities to prove everyone else wrong. I quickly realized the old model no longer worked. Affordable housing means stability, but not influence. It brings money, but it doesn't create an image. And I didn't just want to earn. I wanted the city to start looking up again. Literally. If a building can't be seen from space, what's the point? That's how I moved into luxury. Big projects. Properties that don't hide. They dominate. I bought troubled buildings, abandoned lots, complicated assets everyone else rejected. I invested money, time, nerves, and turned them into symbols. I wasn't buying real estate. I was buying the future and leasing it out. My business looked glamorous only on magazine covers. Inside, it was pure calculation with a bit of aggression. I never treated construction as architecture. To me, it was always a financial operation with a facade. I almost never used my own money at all. The whole point of wealth is to risk other people's capital. I brought the idea, the scale, the confidence. Banks brought the rest. If a project looked like its failure would hurt everyone at once, the money came quickly. No one likes sinking boats. Everyone likes ships that look unsinkable. I always liked bad properties. Old hotels, dead buildings, unfinished projects people spoke about with pity. They all had one thing in common. No one wanted to deal with them anymore, which meant the price was ridiculous. I wasn't buying walls. I was buying the right to rewrite history. The cheapest renovation is a reputation makeover. New York was in crisis back then, and the city desperately needed good news. I didn't come with requests. I came with offers. You give tax breaks, I make the neighborhood show up on the map again. It was an exchange, not charity. The project near the train station became my ticket into the banking big leagues. After that, people trusted me faster than they calculated. I never liked gradual growth. It's boring, and it shows fear too clearly. I always chose the jump, a big one, a demonstrative one. Trump Tower didn't appear because the market needed another building. It appeared as a statement. The luxury there was deliberately excessive. Marble, gold, glass. Prices were set above the market on purpose. When it's expensive, it's exclusive. People weren't paying for square footage. They were paying for the feeling that they had bought a floor above everyone else. At some point, I understood a simple thing. You don't actually have to build. It's enough to allow the use of your last name. My name began earning on its own. Hotels, residences, casinos. Often, I wasn't even the owner. I sold the brand, with almost no costs, with almost no risk. A rare case where letters on a facade bring in more money than the facade itself. All income went straight back into the system. Money wasn't taken out, it circulated. Debt grew, assets grew faster. As long as that ratio held, everything worked. That's how, by the end of the 80s, the first big billion appeared, on paper, but with very real influence. If I had to describe the model simply, I took money people trusted me with, assets everyone had written off, sold a sense of status, and turned my last name into a tool. It was business on the edge. But in New York, there's no other way to play. There, you're either the owner, or someone else is calculating your rent. I chose the first option. The loudest statement was the tower on Fifth Avenue. Glass, gold, scale, my name on the facade, Trump Tower. Not just a building, a manifesto. At that moment, I understood something important. A name is an asset. My name on the facade was worth more than the walls themselves. People weren't buying square footage. They were buying a feeling of victory. I didn't build small. I built to be noticed. Because in a big city, the one who survives is the one who's visible. New York back then was a city everyone had written off. I simply refused to accept that, and the city responded in kind. The most valuable asset in this business isn't even money. The most valuable asset is audacity backed by calculation. Without calculation, it's stupidity. Without audacity, it's boredom. And I never liked either. And then the scary part happened. Debt, bankruptcy risk. They started explaining to me that it was over, not quietly, and not by just one person. Newspapers, banks, analysts, a full choir. In their version, the story was simple and very convenient. I borrowed too much, swung too wide, and finally got what I deserved. Experts were especially enthusiastic. Experts love moments when they can confidently say, "We warned you," even if they were silent before. From an accounting perspective, the situation did look heavy. The market went down, interest rates went up, debt became larger than anyone wanted to see. In ordinary life, that's called a catastrophe. In mine, it's the beginning of a serious conversation. Because there's a subtle point many people miss. When an ordinary person declares bankruptcy, it's a tragedy. When I do it, it's an invitation to the negotiating table. They told me I wouldn't survive, that the system would crush me, that the banks were stronger. I listened, nodded, and thought about something else. Banks have paperwork, and I have assets, reputation, and time. And one more thing, no panic. In a crisis, that's the key advantage. The one who panics negotiates from weakness. I didn't play that game. I realized fairly quickly that bankruptcy isn't the end of the road. It's the moment when all unnecessary noise disappears. No one pretends everything is fine anymore. Only numbers, interests, and fears remain. And that's when it becomes clear that banks are afraid too. Because if I fall, they fall with me. And they really didn't want that. I began to apply pressure through negotiations. Calmly, methodically, without hysteria. I stretched timelines, rebuilt terms, pushed for write-downs. Sometimes hard, sometimes through pauses and silence. I came to meetings without rush, sometimes even with a smile. People expected a broken man and instead saw someone ready to sit at the table longer than anyone else. That changes the balance. Reputation played its role again. My name was still working. The assets hadn't gone anywhere. The towers were standing. The hotels were taking guests. Writing me off as a mistake turned out to be impossible. It was easier to negotiate than to try to prove that all of this suddenly meant nothing. This wasn't a beautiful comeback. It was a test of endurance. And at some point, it became clear that I simply didn't get tired as quickly as they expected. That's when I fully learned the main rule of crisis. If you stay calm, you're already one step ahead. Panic is the most expensive asset in moments like that, and I preferred someone else to own it. After the whole story with the debt and negotiations, I came to a conclusion many people miss. In America, it's not enough just to survive. It matters how you do it. You can quietly crawl out and disappear, or you can come back in a way that gets people talking again. I chose the second option, because this country doesn't love modesty. It loves those who look like winners, even if the victory is still in progress. I consciously began changing the game. Before, My name was on documents and facades. Now it had to live separately. Gloss, light, status, all of that stopped being entertainment and became a working tool. America is a visual country. If you look like you have everything under control, people believe you do. Even if the accountant isn't fully convinced yet. There was noticeably more attention, more cameras, more talk around me. Beautiful women nearby? Of course. Success has aesthetics too. No one wants to listen to stories about frugality. People like watching those who live large and don't apologize for it. I never deliberately played show business. I just lived as if I were always being watched. And as it turned out, I was. My image started working on its own. Covers, parties, television, all of it amplified the effect. The name became recognizable not just in business circles, but beyond them. And that shifted the balance of power. When people know you, it's easier to explain your terms. When people talk about you, they want to deal with you. At the same time, I always understood the difference between noise and danger. Noise is useful. It distracts, creates an aura, adds weight. Danger is different. This world has many people who know too much and stay too close for too long. I prefer to know exactly as much as necessary and step aside in time. That's also survival, just less visible. Gradually, the image stopped being a side effect of the business and became its continuation. Publicity began converting into opportunities, attention into deals, reputation into influence. After the bankruptcies, I understood the main thing. If you don't tell the world who you are now, others will do it for you, and you may not like their version. My image seemed excessive to many, too loud, too bright, too direct. I was called provocative, sometimes even tasteless. I listened and smiled, because the image was doing its job. It worked. In a world where everyone tries to look acceptably similar, I chose to be recognizable, and recognizability is currency. The real breakthrough came with television. The Apprentice turned out to be the perfect form. It wasn't entertainment about business. It was business disguised as entertainment. I sat at the table, made decisions, fired people, explained who delivered and who didn't. Essentially, I was doing the same thing I'd done all my life, just with cameras. America understood it instantly. A tough boss, clear rules, a phrase everyone remembered. Television turned my personality into a format. By the mid-2000s, recognition had become almost absolute. My name was known even to people who had never opened the business section. I was constantly in the media, quoted, discussed, parodied. It was the peak, and it was exactly at that moment that I began pulling back from show business. Not because interest faded, but because I always knew one thing. If you stay too long, people stop taking you seriously. You turn into a caricature, and I prefer to leave while control is still in my hands. I clearly distinguish between noise and danger. Noise is useful. It creates reach, energy, motion. Danger is something else. It starts when the show replaces decision-making. I locked in the result and moved on. The cameras had done their job. They turned me into a figure known across the entire country, regardless of how people felt about me. After that, only one logical step remained: politics. When your name is a brand, when everyone knows you, when you know how to manage attention and aren't afraid of conflict, the next level is power. Not as an extension of the show, but as a new peak. I became a media figure, fixed the high point, and went where the stakes are higher and the rules are tougher, because that's where the real decisions are made. The moment I announced I was entering politics, the level of chaos spiked sharply. Before that, I was an outsider, but a familiar one. In business, people might dislike me, be irritated, argue with me, but they knew who they were dealing with. They respected the results and were wary of the style. In politics, everything had to start from zero. No credit history, no trust, no our people, just a last name, experience, and a complete absence of illusions. I moved through the Republican Party quickly, too quickly for many to be comfortable. I didn't blend in, didn't wait my turn, didn't ask permission. I simply entered and took space, and that's when the real fun began. My opponents realized they'd have to confront me seriously and followed the familiar path. Complaints, accusations, leaks. The loudest was the so-called Russian trace. Suddenly, a trip to Moscow back in the 80s was dragged out and turned into a political crime. The story dragged on through the entire campaign and the entire first term. Investigations, leaks, hints, screaming headlines. I was accused of cooperating with Russia. Ridiculous. I had trouble negotiating with Americans. Now suddenly I was running geopolitics. But the scandal lived its own life because it was convenient. It allowed people to avoid discussing decisions and instead discuss suspicions. There were impeachment attempts, an atmosphere of constant pressure. And once again, I behaved the same way I always had in crises. No panic. Confidence. I just kept working. When you're attacked every day, you have two options. You break or you adapt. I chose the second. The hardest part wasn't the pressure from outside. It was manageability on the inside. My decisions were sabotaged. People who formerly worked with me often played against me. I was inconvenient. And Washington doesn't like inconvenient people. Predictability and loyalty to the system are valued there. I came in with a business mindset and started asking questions that aren't asked in politics. I openly told allies, services cost money. America is not a charity. I told NATO, pay up. They were surprised. Apparently, they were used to getting it for free. Across the ocean, they didn't like me either. They were used to soft wording and endless promises. I spoke directly and demanded specifics. It hurt the atmosphere, but improved the balance. Over time, it became clear that the Russian Tracen story had been built on lies and fabricated accusations. Years later, that was officially confirmed. But back then, no one cared. The goal wasn't truth, it was exhaustion. In that sense, the first term was reconnaissance by fire, a test of endurance, resistance, and the system's limits. After the first term, I stepped into the shadows, but not as a loser. I left understanding how everything really works. I saw where the resistance was, where the fear was, where the weak points were. The first term wasn't a triumph. It was preparation, and sometimes that matters more. Then I stayed in the shadows. But a shadow isn't absence. It's a position. It's when you're not in the frame, but the frame still revolves around you. I watched, listened, remembered, and I saw the system begin to creak under its own weight. The show went on without me, but it was losing interest fast. The funniest part was that they kept fighting me even when I wasn't in the White House. Biden was fighting my shadow, my past, my words from a year earlier. Formally, I wasn't president, but I was still the main topic. In the news, in arguments, in fears. It's a rare talent to be absent and still dominate. From the shadows, you see more clearly. I saw decisions being made slowly, confidence replaced by explanations, the country losing momentum. And I waited, not because I doubted, because in politics, just like in business, timing matters. And that moment was getting closer. Then I stepped out. I saw the opening and entered without hesitation. Biden was already struggling just to perform basic duties. I could at least walk 10 meters without falling. The contrast was obvious. No commentary required. The campaign turned into an obstacle marathon. Tons of cases, accusations, attempts to corner me through the courts. Hundreds of charges were filed. I was dragged through institutions. They tried to put me behind bars. It was supposed to break me. It didn't work. I walked out of courtrooms calm, composed, and what irritated my opponents most, with growing support. Sometimes the best rally is walking out of a courtroom. But there were harsher moments too. An assassination attempt. I've always said my life isn't for the faint-hearted. When someone shoots at you, a lot falls into place. And yes, ratings rise faster. Not because people love danger, but because they see resolve. In moments like that, pretending disappears. The campaign against Harris was loud and brutal. Once again, they tried to portray me as anything but a serious candidate. But the country looked at facts, at energy, at the ability to take a hit, and drew conclusions. In the end, it was simple. I survived pressure, courts, attempts to destroy my reputation, and physical threat. I came out of the race a winner and took the presidential seat again. Not as a surprise, as the result of endurance. They thought it was the finale. It was just intermission. I won, clearly, without questions. Not on points, not by a razor-thin margin, but in a way that made arguing pointless. And the moment that became clear, I immediately started my own game. A new team, a new movement, the same meaning, but tougher and more direct. MAGA stopped being a campaign slogan and became an operating mode. No warm-up, no adjustment period, no explanations for those who weren't going to listen anyway. The world, of course, was in shock. I wasn't. After everything that had happened before, it's hard to surprise me. I came in prepared. The first term was reconnaissance. The second became execution. I completely rebuilt the team and placed my people where so-called neutral figures had been sitting before. In politics, there are no neutrals, only those who haven't chosen a side yet. I fixed that. Then came the part I truly enjoy. Big moves, big statements, big irritants. I calmly said, why not take Greenland, just for the collection? Territory, resources, control. People laughed, then they started calculating. And once people start calculating, you're already halfway to agreement. I've always been amused by how ideas are first called insane, and then discussed at serious panels. I identified China immediately as a problem, not a partner for endless dialogue. Rare earths, supply chains, technological dependence, all of it needed to be cut carefully but decisively. I prefer strategic materials to be under control, not under promises. That's not aggression, that's calculation. The Maduro story turned out to be elegant. I call it diplomatic abduction. Just a situation where the number of options becomes smaller than you'd like. Oil? Possibly. Influence? Definitely. The Western Hemisphere should feel who's in charge here. Not in slogans, but in practice. A special passion of mine. Tariffs. I love them. They're the most honest tool in international trade. You want to make money off the United States? Fine, then pay the price. Many had grown used to the idea that America could be quietly skimmed while smiling and talking about partnership. I removed that illusion. The smile stayed, but now the bill comes immediately. I resolved 8 conflicts. At least that's how I see it. Calmly, without fanfare. No Nobel Prize. Apparently they lost my number. No problem. I got it anyway. From a Venezuelan politician. Symbolic. Sometimes recognition comes not from those you expect, but from those who understood the result. Europe was simpler. I told them the truth again. They were offended again. I viewed NATO as a tool, not a social club. Pressure, money, responsibility, or the conversation is short. Europe is cracking from the inside. We'll see how that ends. With Russia, things turned out to be far more serious than many would like to admit. Vladimir Putin is the most experienced and the most cold-blooded player I've had to deal with. He's been in politics for a long time. He's survived more crises than most European leaders have seen meetings. And he never makes moves just for applause. You can't talk to an opponent like that in slogans, only in interests. I've always believed you should talk to the people who actually make decisions. And here the situation was absolutely clear. While Europeans prefer to sit on the sidelines, make concerned faces, and read memorized scripts, I was the only one speaking directly. No intermediaries, no hysteria, no attempts to please the audience. In those conversations, posture doesn't matter. Results do. Putin is a tough negotiator. He respects strength, consistency, and patience. And that respect is mutual. I have no illusions and no romantic expectations, but I believe it's possible to reach agreements with him. Difficult, slow, on cold terms, but possible. The alternative is usually worse, and history has proven that more than once. The problem, as often happens, isn't the two sides sitting at the table, but those running around it shouting. There's always a jester who confuses diplomacy with performance and serious conversation with a show. Those characters do the most damage, because they don't bear responsibility for consequences, but they love attention. I still hope an agreement can be reached, not for beautiful statements and not for headlines, for control, predictability, and for major players to stop guessing. The world has enough chaos without adding more artificially. With Russia, only one format is possible. Tough, direct, and without illusions. I'm used to that format, and that's exactly why this conversation even has a chance to happen. So here we are at the end. Yes, I had strong starting positions. That's something I've never denied. But a start is only an opportunity, not a result. Many people in this country have had such opportunities. The question is always the same. Who managed to turn them into something real? And if you look around, the answer is obvious. Almost no one. Becoming a billionaire can come down to luck. Becoming a figure who is feared, discussed, and actively blocked at every level. That's a different league entirely. I went from a developer to a man whose name is known worldwide and who is seen as a threat to the established order. They tried to write me off, break me, ridicule me, isolate me. But every time it ended the same way. I stayed in the game, not because I was lucky, but because I knew how to take a hit and wait for the moment. And most importantly, I'm not finished yet. Stories on this scale don't end on schedule. They continue as long as there's energy, ideas, and the will to move forward. A third term? We'll see. In this game, there are always moves no one expects.